Have you ever had a dream so clear you could describe every detail of it, but somehow, years later, it still hasn't happened? Maybe you've thought about starting that business so many times you practically know the business plan by heart, yet the first page is still blank. Maybe you've imagined the conversation you need to have, the risk you need to take, the move you need to make 100 times in your head but never once in real life. Maybe people around you would say you're smart, thoughtful, a deep thinker. And maybe in your most honest moments, you wonder if that's the problem, because the thinking never stops, and neither does the waiting. If you've ever felt like your mind is the most productive place in your life while your life itself stays perfectly still, this story is for you. Because once there was a man who spent 4 years preparing to begin, until one afternoon in a hardware store showed him the one truth about achievement that changed everything. Stay with me until the end. In a quiet university town where bookshops outnumbered coffee shops and everyone had a theory about everything, there lived a 29-year-old man named Nathan. Nathan was, by every measure, the smartest person in any room he entered. He had a master's degree in economics. He read 2 books a week. He could dismantle an argument, spot a logical flaw, and map a system in the time it took most people to find a pen. Nathan believed in one thing above all else, that the right idea, perfectly understood, would eventually produce the right action. Clarity precedes commitment, he would say. You have to understand something completely before you can do it properly. He was, in his own words, a man who thought before he leaped. The problem was he had been thinking about the leap for 4 years and had not moved an inch. Nathan wanted to build an online education platform, courses for people who couldn't afford university but wanted to learn real skills. He believed in the idea the way some people believe in a cause. At night, he sketched wireframes. On weekends, he filled notebooks with curriculum outlines, pricing models, competitor analyses, user personas, marketing funnels. He had folders inside folders inside folders on his laptop, all labeled with dates and version numbers. He had never published a single lesson. In the same town lived a woman named Priya. Priya had no economics degree. She had studied art briefly and dropped out. She was 27. She had started a small online teaching channel 18 months ago, basic video lessons on hand lettering and design, filmed on her phone, edited on free software, posted without a logo or a brand strategy or a business plan. Her first video had 11 views. 9 of them were her mother. By the time Nathan heard about her from a mutual friend at a dinner party, Priya had 34,000 subscribers, a paid course with 600 students, and a waiting list for her next cohort. She had built, without a single framework or a market research document, exactly what Nathan had been designing in theory for 4 years. Nathan went home that night and opened his laptop. Version 47 of his business plan stared back at him. He closed the lid without adding a single word. 3 weeks later, Nathan received an email. A foundation he had applied to 18 months earlier, a grant for education entrepreneurs, had selected 6 finalists. He was one of them. The final stage required a live demonstration, a working prototype of their platform, shown to a panel of judges in 60 days. Nathan read the email 4 times. Then he opened his laptop and searched for his prototype. There was no prototype. There had never been a prototype. There were 214 documents and 0 products. For the first time in 4 years, the thinking stopped, not because he had found clarity, because he had run out of time to hide inside it. He sat on the floor of his study, surrounded by notebooks, and felt something cold and specific settle in his chest. Not panic, something worse, recognition. He had been the most prepared person who had never prepared anything. He had been an architect who had never laid a single brick. And now 60 days stood between him and the truth about who he actually was. He called his father, who listened quietly, and then said, "Nathan, before you do anything else, go and see Frank." Frank was 64 years old and ran a hardware shop on the edge of town that he had owned for 31 years. He was also Nathan's godfather and the man Nathan's father called whenever Nathan needed to be told something he wouldn't hear from anyone else. Nathan drove to the shop on a Saturday morning, feeling faintly ridiculous. He had a master's degree. He was going to a hardware store for life advice. Frank was behind the counter sorting bolts into trays when Nathan walked in. He looked up, studied Nathan's face for 2 seconds, and said, "You finally hit the wall." "I've been planning something for 4 years," Nathan said, "and I've produced nothing. And now I have 60 days to show something real and I don't know where to start." Frank set down the tray. "Come with me, I want to show you something." Frank led Nathan to the back of the shop, where a workbench ran the length of the wall. On it sat a half-built cabinet, drawers, hinges, panels all laid out in order. Frank picked up a single wooden drawer and held it out. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "A drawer," Nathan said. "It's an answer," Frank said. "Before I built this cabinet, I had a question: will these dovetail joints hold under daily use? I could have thought about that for a year, read books about joinery, watched videos, drawn diagrams, or I could build one drawer, open and close it 100 times and know. I built the drawer. I had my answer in 3 days." He set it down. "You've been living in the question, Nathan. You've never built a drawer." He leaned against the workbench and looked at Nathan steadily. "I'm going to tell you 3 things. They are simple. You are going to resist them because you are a man who loves complexity. Resist that urge. Law 1. The first version is not the real thing. It is the question. You have been trying to build the final version before you have built any version. That is not preparation. That is avoidance dressed in the language of perfectionism. Every great thing that has ever been made began as something embarrassing, a rough sketch, a broken prototype, a lesson recorded in a noisy room on a phone propped against a cereal box. The purpose of the first version is not to impress anyone. It is to ask reality a question and hear the answer. Until something exists, you are only talking to yourself. Build the drawer first. It does not need to be beautiful. It needs to exist. Law 2. Thinking is rehearsal. Becoming requires an audience. Every hour you spend planning in private is an hour you are rehearsing a performance that no one has asked for yet. Achievement is not a solo act. It requires contact with the world, with real people who respond, push back, ignore you, pay you, or tell you that what you built doesn't solve their problem. That friction is not an obstacle to clarity. It is the only source of real clarity. Priya did not have a better idea than you. She had an audience before she had a strategy, and the audience taught her everything she needed to know. You cannot think your way to understanding what people need. You have to show them something and watch what happens. Law 3. Becoming is not a decision. It is a sequence of small public acts. You are waiting to feel ready before you act. But readiness is not a feeling that arrives before action. It is a feeling that is built by action, layer by layer, the way a cabinet is built joint by joint. Every time you do something visible, publish a lesson, send an email, share an idea, ask someone to try what you made, you become, slightly and irreversibly, the person who does that. And the person who does that consistently in public for long enough becomes the person you have been imagining in private. You do not think your way into becoming someone. You act your way there, one small public act at a time. Frank picked up a chisel, turned back to the cabinet, and said without looking up, "You have 60 days. Stop planning. Start building. The first lesson does not need to be good. It needs to be done. Go home and record it tonight." Nathan stood in the hardware shop for a long moment. Then he said, "That's it." "That's everything," Frank said. "The rest is just time." Nathan drove home and before he could talk himself out of it, set his laptop on the kitchen table, opened a blank document and wrote the outline for one lesson. Not 50 lessons. One. That night he recorded it, 12 minutes, one take, no editing, uploaded before midnight. It had a spelling mistake in the title. He fixed it in the morning. 14 people watched it in the first week. 3 of them sent him questions. Those questions told him more about what people actually needed than 4 years of market research had. He recorded a second lesson, then a third. By day 30, he had 11 lessons and a rough, functional prototype built using a free platform. It was not version 47 of his plan. It was version 1 of something real. On day 58, he stood before the grant panel and demonstrated a working course with 43 enrolled beta users, an average rating of 4.6 out of 5, and 3 written testimonials from people who had used his lessons to get freelance work. He did not win the grant. He came second. But one of the judges, a venture philanthropist named Dr. Osai, pulled him aside afterward and said, "You built something real in 60 days. Most people in that room have been planning for years. Send me your deck next month." 6 months later, with Dr. Osai's seed funding and 380 paying students, Nathan launched his platform properly. Not version 47. Version 1, rough, real, and alive. He called Frank to tell him. Frank said, "How's the cabinet coming?" Nathan laughed for a long time. "My friend, Nathan's story is not about moving fast or skipping preparation. It is about the difference between thinking about a life and living one, between rehearsing in private and becoming in public. The truth about achievement is not that the best thinkers win. It is that the people who build the first drawer, imperfect, early, before they feel ready, are the ones who eventually build the cabinet. Remember 3 things. First, your first version is a question, not a statement. It does not need to be good, it needs to exist. Whatever you have been planning, name the smallest possible version of it and build only that. Not the platform, the lesson, not the business, the first email, not the book, the first page. Second, find an audience before you find perfection. Show one real person what you have made this week, not a friend who will be kind, someone who has the problem you are trying to solve. Their reaction will teach you more in 10 minutes than 10 months of private planning. Third, do one small public act today. Post, send, publish, share, ask. Something that puts what is inside your head into the world where the world can respond. Because becoming is not a private event. It happens in contact with reality. Your challenge this week before Friday: build and share your first drawer. It does not need to be finished. It does not need to be perfect. It needs to be real, and it needs to be seen by at least one person outside your own head. Because here is what Nathan learned and what you need to know: you have not been lazy. You have been brilliant in exactly the wrong direction. The thinking was never the problem. The problem was believing that thinking was the work. It isn't. The work is the work. And the work begins the moment you quit thinking and start becoming. If this story recognized something in you, if you know, honestly, that you have been living in version 47 of a plan that has never become version 1, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. What is the one thing you have been thinking about for too long that you are going to start building this week? I read every single one. I will be back next week with another story. Until then, quit thinking. Start becoming.